Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Curtis.
We're with the Ann and Sandy Cross Conservation Area.
Today we're going to be showing you a video that can be done at home that nicely ties into the conservation area where Andrew is, which is all about promoting the local wildlife, both plants and animals. This activity allows you to be a citizen scientist and supports the urban wildlife that you can find in your own yard. Which activity is that, Andrew?
We're going to be making bird nesting balls. These are balls constructed from natural materials which can aid birds in making their nests with the proper material.
If you think about what time of year it is, it's a nice spring afternoon, which is around the time the birds are starting to think about making their yearly nests.
Let's get into it.
Just so you have an idea of what you're making this nesting ball for, to see what these birds use the resources for, we have a few nests that have been long unused, and we use them for educational purposes. So I'm going to start with this one right here. This is a tree swallow nest. It's in this box to kind of protect it, but it gives you a good idea of how they use the materials from the nesting ball to really insulate their nest there. So you see feathers, there's some moss in there, there's also some fur. So this is a good insulating one. Right here is another, sorry, it's quite windy, you don't want things blowing away. Here's another nest here, it's a robin nest. You can see it's very different from the one I just showed you. This one's more mud-based. Don't really notice the moss underneath, that's just kind of holding it. But then again, a good idea of how different a nest can look. Next, we have a chipping sparrow, and oh my gosh, this one's super fragile, sorry. This one's mainly actually made up of toilet paper, ironically, with a little bit of, the insulation in between the drywall layers there. To give you an idea of some different materials used, also the size of it, you can see in relation to my hand. And then finally we have this fun, it's called a hanging nest here. Let me just get it out of the container. So this is a Baltimore Oriole nest, it's a hanging nest. And you're going to see again another fascinating material used in this nest, which is fishing line. I don't want to take it out too much because it's quite windy and you probably can't hear me at all in this video, but that's okay. But this is just to give you an idea of how, depending on the bird species you see in your area, the types of materials they use may differ. But then it's also to give you an idea of how damaging some materials can be because they're maybe not the natural materials they would find in nature, and they'll never decompose and return back to the land. So just some things to consider when we move on to this next steps of what you actually should put into your nesting balls. Okay, so we're going to talk about how you can actually make your nest. You kind of need a frame to tuck in all the goodies that are going to be available to the birds. So there's a few ways that you can make a frame, some that you can purchase, some that you can just use household materials. So the purchasing ones are things like the suet cage, which is basically a metal frame that you can drill onto a wall or hang from a tree situation. There's other kind of branch balls that you can buy from stores and such, but you don't have to spend any money on this. You can just use things from your house. One thing, for example, is a hanger. So using a hanger and a pair of pliers, you might have to get an adult to help you to bend it efficiently. You can bend your hanger into a contraption, a shape that looks like this. You kind of want it to be small and compact and have lots of places to tuck in things. And this is nice because then you also have a way to hang it from a tree. Another thing that you can use is simple as something like this. So this has had onions in it. It's an onion bag, but it also works. You just kind of have to figure out a way to hang it from a tree, which can be with some twine or something. So that's a few alternatives. You can even, if you have a spare, wooden wreath around, that's something you can use. You can get creative as long as it's just, natural materials or something that you can remove at the end of the season. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the stringy type things that you can use in your bird nesting ball. We're going to go through both the good and the bad. So some things that you might find around your house are some nice kind of rough cord looking like this. This is called jute, is what this is. It can be used in a number of different ways. Mostly you'd be using it for crafting purposes or maybe some sort of packaging and storing. But it can be used in bird nesting situations. When you're using this though, you don't want to just put this big huge bundle into your nesting contraption, your nesting ball. You want to cut it down into 3 to 6 inch length pieces, because anything too short and it's not useful to the birds, that doesn't do anything for them. and then anything too long and it becomes a hazard. It becomes like a choking hazard and it can ruin, break legs, that sort of thing, right? So you want to make sure it's only 3 to 6 inches long, which you can use a ruler for. Some other things that you might come across in your home is string. So as long as it's undyed like this, you can use it. That's totally fine. This is just some cotton string, which is totally decomposable. It takes a little bit, but it will decompose. Some things that you don't want to use though would be things like this, which is yarn. One, this is way too long, and two, it's dyed, which means it has a whole bunch of extra chemicals added to it, which is not really good for our bird friends. Some other things that you may come across is kind of this decorative crafting grass type stuff. So this is very synthetic, it's not very real, so it won't do that well out in nature. So an alternative that you can use, again being very careful and conscious of where you're getting these materials. If they're in a protected land, you don't want to be going out and picking them, but if they're in your backyard or nearby, you can. So this is a cattail. This is totally natural. It's the same kind of idea of being a stringy material that you can put inside a nest, and many bird species would actually favor something like this. Something else, trying to make sure that nothing blows away, sorry, is underneath the robin's nest here that you can see if I remove it very carefully, and that is actually moss. Moss is another perfect material that can be used, and again, if I pull up the tree swallow nest here, you can see how much of it is actually just within this nest on the right side here. So that's just a few things. Again, the easiest things that you can get to are, you know, your twigs in your backyard and such, but you just want to consider how natural is what you're putting in to your ball. Will it decompose or will it not? And where are you getting it from? How many chemicals are in it?
So another thing to take into consideration when making these bird nesting balls is how do these materials hold up to weather. So like cat fur and dog fur, they have natural properties in them that make them pretty good to holding up against water, whereas something like a cotton ball, even though it's organic material, tends to shrink. So we're just going to pour some water on this and watch how it reacts. Yeah, so see how it has shrunk and is no longer that fluffy, and it lost most of its property that will keep you warm. So cotton balls are a no-go. Same thing goes for dryer lint. I have a little bit of dryer lint here. We'll pour some water on it. And same thing. Lost all its fluff, nothing there. No good. So try to stay away from cotton-based things in your bird nesting balls, and fur and different kinds of natural string work much better.
Just looking around my front yard, found some stuff that would work really well on the nesting balls. There's some nice long dry grass at the bottom of these bushes. Just come a bit closer and I'll get down nice and low so you can see the grass. Nice and long, super natural, will decompose, and it's actually favored by a few species of bird. So I'm sure if you look within your front or backyard, you may be able to find some of this stuff at the bottom of some of your trees or bushes. Let's go around and see what else we can find. Okay, so now we're in my backyard, and conveniently some bushes were trimmed last year, and we kept all of the bits that we trimmed off. So this is also pretty good. Obviously, like the thicker bunches you don't want, but just the little twiggy parts, like these are good just to break off and break down into smaller bits, because remember, they're 3 to 6 inches long. Something like this too. You can break off, and then you can just break off little bits of it.
So with the onion bag, what we did here is we wrapped a little bit of hempen twine around the hole where you got the onions out, so that we can close it up so no animals can get stuck in there. And it also makes a little bit so that we can hang it from a tree. In this bag, it is full of my dog's hair. This is perfect for the animals. It's really warm, it's thin, and with animal hair, it's thin enough that if it wraps around one of their legs, it will just break off, unlike human hair. Human hair is very small, very thin, but also very strong, and it will hurt animals, so please do not put your own hair in there. You want to pull out strands of the fur after mixing it, just so it's easier for the birds to be able to pull out. You don't want them to have to put too much effort into getting it or trying to get tangled in it. So we're just going in here and pulling out as much as you can. There's way too many holes, you don't have to pull them out through all of these, just do as many that's convenient.
Alright, so before you start to stuff your nesting ball, you basically want to make a stew of all of your materials and ingredients. So I have it kind of started here where I just have some fur, some other kind of stuffing material, and there's some of the jute in there, and I'm basically just kind of mixing it up, trying to make the biggest mess I can. You just want to mix it up so that nothing's too clumped together and it's kind of more accessible throughout, if that makes sense. And in here you'd be adding some of the grasses around your yard, some of the sticks and stuff, but again, just because we're on the conservation area, the Annan Sandy Cross Conservation Area, we don't want to be removing any of those natural resources, so that's why this ball specifically doesn't have that stuff in it. Alright, and then once you have it all mixed up, then you grab your nesting ball, which mine was a little further away. This is not enough in here, but it'll give you the idea, and you just kind of tuck it in there like so. And then you can just kind of pull it through, make sure that it's at least a little bit windproof, tuck it around things so that it's like that. So this is how this is done, this is how the onion bag is done. You can see that they're kind of stuffed up like that. Okay, so now that we have our completed nesting ball, now this is where it's your role as citizen scientist to be observant and make that decision making of where is the best place to hang it, right? Obviously you're going to need to hang it from a tree preferably, or some part on your house. You need to think about how other things will be interacting with that. Is it accessible by other predators? How sheltered is it? Because you might just want to hang it nice and simple on the side of a branch like that. But if there's a good gust of wind, will it stay there? If there's rain, will it get super wet? So that's going to be up to you to decide where you're actually going to hang your nesting ball and where it's the most beneficial to birds.
And that concludes our bird nesting box activity.
So now that we've shown you the steps on how to put together your own bird nesting balls, we're going to leave you with some questions, some food for thought that you can monitor over the next coming days and weeks after hanging up your nests.
So what materials would negatively impact the bird's way of life? So with this reflective tinfoil, would it bring attention that normally wouldn't be brought to the bird's nest? Along with this colored yarn, very bright red. Would predators maybe look at something that they normally wouldn't see? What other materials do you think would be a poor choice for putting in the bird's nesting balls?
We showed you some of the materials we found lying around our houses and how they were poor insulators and didn't hold up to the weather that well. So what would happen if the material you chose in your own house got wet or maybe didn't withstand the wind that well? That being said, over the next coming days and weeks, we're going to be tasking you with watching how your nesting balls react with your local birds in the area. How often do they frequent? What types of birds visit it? And what materials are they taking? Because you maybe want to put more of that material in when you replenish your nesting balls.
So please remember, only do this at your house or local areas that aren't already having the natural resources. This is only to aid birds that don't have an abundance of stuff to use. So here at the Cross, we will not be using them because the birds have so much stuff to use already. Thank you.
Have fun making your nesting balls.
Bye.